Good evening, everybody. It is 00 Zulu on Tuesday, the 28th of December, if you're joining us live, and welcome. Things are a little bit different here tonight. Brian's not able to join us. He might or might not poke in a little bit in the background. He'll be skulking around in the back room, taking care of some business for me a little bit. But it's pretty much going to be all me tonight. Now, hopefully he'll be back real soon. So tonight is the sixth in our series on the GNS 430 and 530 navigators. And let me see, Brian, let's see if we can get that first poll launched. I'm doing things kind of by myself here, so if it doesn't run quite as smoothly as normal, please forgive us. I'm going to run this first poll on your basic pilot experience here to kick things off while I do the introduction. So just answer that question there. When we get to the end, we will see what we've got. First thing is, thanks to everybody who's been participating in all of these series, 6 regular scheduled programs. Now we had one extra section I ran when we had a little snafu with the recording. So in all, 7 programs. I don't know how many people we've had in attendance in total, something over 5,000, probably closer to 7,000 people. And the recordings have been watched on YouTube, passing 40,000 times. So thanks so much for being here and for attending and for responding, asking questions, giving me some suggestions here and there. I've been trying to integrate all these as we go along, and I think things have gotten better and better, and certainly each individual presentation's gotten better as I kind of gather some ideas from you and some things that you'd like to see. So that's all going really well. And thanks also to those who have made contributions in the more tangible form. And we've been able to help pay for the Zoom account that we use to do these large webinars and keep things going. So that keeps Brian and me motivated a little bit to stay on top of this stuff and keeps us interested. I really do enjoy the engagement, though. Those of you who've emailed questions and problems you've run into in the real world. So keep them coming. We're getting close to the end of this series. There's not a whole lot more that we can talk about these navigators. We do have a little bit more. I suspect I'll be doing another program just with a general Q&A, questions that we've gotten, especially email questions that not everybody has seen. I think a future episode will dive into some of those. And we may also do one where we dive into some of the features that we can't do with the simulator, things like trying to use it with ForFlight or trying to use it with ADS-B in. The simulator is simply not capable of doing these actions. So we're stuck with watching a recording in the airplane. Not my favorite way to do it, but it's better than nothing. So let's see, it looks like we got some polls in here. More than half of us are instrument rated. We got about 3/4 are private or instrument ratings here, a couple ATPs, welcome. Flight instructors, not quite as many flight instructors as I was hoping to see here, about 20%, give or take. And let's see, we got most of you say that you're an intermediate level user, that you can use the GNS navigators pretty effectively. Couple masters, yeah, every now and again, I think I'm of myself as a master on this thing, but I still get caught by surprise every so often. And a couple of newbies, awesome. So then the last question I asked you was what kind of navigator you have, and we've got over 2/3, wow, are on the 430 or 430W, a little over 1/3 on the 530. We've got a bunch of GTNs and G1000. So especially you folks who are running other types of Garmin, a lot of these same features work in the same way with, say, a GTN 650, 750, or with a G1000 type navigator. Just a little different buttonology, a little different menu structure to get to what you're after, but the techniques are very much the same. The Avidynes, yeah, just a handful of Avidyne users in here, and the concepts are the same here, but you'll find the buttonology, how to get into these things in the actual navigator, are quite different on an Avidyne than they are from the Garmin's. I consider myself maybe about 70–75% fluent with an Avidyne navigator, but I'm probably about closer to 95% on a Garmin type navigator. So let's see, I do have a couple limitations I want to talk about, especially tonight. I've mentioned this in previous episodes, which, by the way, I'm going to show you here. Let me get over to my other presentation here. Oops, not that one. Let me close this one out. And what I'm after is this one. Share this. I need to get a need a video assistant to handle this stuff for me. So firstly, a couple other resources. If you haven't already found Captain Brian Schiff's website, he's got a page on there that's dedicated to information and resources from this series. It's a great place to go. We keep it updated with links to the latest episode and all the previous episodes as well. There's a link to the simulator that we use. I'll show you another link here in just a moment. But this is on the on his website, and some other useful information that we found over the series here. So it's a good place to visit. And we've got another poll coming up in just a minute. So those of you who didn't get in that first one, we'll have another one for you here in just a moment. So yeah, thanks, Brian. He just posted that link in the chat box. So if you're able to pull up the chat box, then you can go click directly on that link to his page of resources for us. This is the website or the link to the Garmin simulator that I'm using. This link is also available on his website. It's much easier than typing this in. There are a few versions of this simulator, and I know some of you have used an earlier version that I inadvertently posted the wrong link on an earlier program. That one doesn't work with Windows 10. This one does. And unfortunately, this one does not emulate the non-WAS versions of the Navigator. So I'm using it only for the WAS style navigators. So all the recordings are available on my YouTube channel. There's a link directly to it. And this should be also available on Brian's webpage. If you're feeling generous and would like to make some contributions of a monetary style, here's a couple of links: Zelle, Venmo, and PayPal. We would certainly appreciate your contributions. And they go to motivate us to keep new ones coming on down the pipe. So let's see, we are now going to go into what the program is going to be tonight. We're going to focus on SIDs and STARs, and we'll talk about how to choose which one a little bit. How to load it into the Navigator is the main thing we wanted to do tonight. And we're going to talk about checking the navigation. This is a critical step that a lot of people don't seem to be doing when you load a procedure into the navigation database to go work for you. You don't compare it to the paper. And this is causing some problems on a couple of specific types of departure and arrival procedures. We'll talk about how that works. And regarding vertical navigation, the Garmin 430 and 530 really don't do very much in the way of vertical navigation. The GTN series does a much better job with them. The Avidyne series will do a much better job for them. The problem is with the GNS series, the 430 and the 530, the WAS versions do have a vertical navigation capability, but you can only put one altitude at one fix in at a time. So it will only give you one location. If you happen to get a descend via or a climb via type clearance, they won't really help you out very much. So it's going to be really important for you as the pilot to make sure you're complying with these restrictions the correct way. So now let's see, have you launched that second poll yet, Brian? Let's see, we got the results there. Here's your SID STAR experience. So take a quick look at here. If you're the type of person who puts no SIDs, no STARs in your flight plan remarks section, I have flown with people who do that before inadvertently. My funny story on that was I was doing a flight up to Portland, Oregon with a friend of mine a few years ago. I didn't know that he always included that note in his remarks section, so I didn't include it. And when he got to copy the clearance for departure out of Portland International Airport, he gets a SID. And this was kind of a showstopper for him. He had never done a SID, had thought they were not for little airplanes anymore, and didn't know what to do, and basically hit a stopping point right there. So we had quite an interesting discussion on that. The SIDs and STARs are not just for the big boys anymore. We get them in the little airplanes more and more. We'll talk a little bit about them in more detail. How you can decide which ones are appropriate for you to use, and make sure that you're complying with them the right way. But The fact of the matter is, if you put no SIDs, no stars in there, they're not going to give you a SID or a star. The problem is they're going to give it to you step by step. So you're going to be flying this basically, but they're going to be reading you each radial to intersect, each heading to fly, each altitude to maintain, and it makes a lot more work for yourself. If instead you will come and join those of us who fly SIDs and stars on a regular basis now, you'll find it's much easier. You get to look at a nice pretty picture that illustrates exactly what this procedure is that you'll be flying. And I don't know about you, but if you're like me, I find I work much better with pictures, and a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it does kind of make things a whole lot easier. I'm seeing a couple suggestions for SIDs to take a look at, and I can't guarantee we're going to get to all those tonight. Those of you who've watched my earlier programs know that I have a nasty tendency to go long virtually always. I suspect that's going to happen again tonight. We'll probably go a little bit past 5 p.m. Pacific time here. Looks like the answers are done coming in, with about 80% of you say that you intentionally put no SIDs, no stars in your remarks section. So hopefully we can demystify some of these and we'll get you using them a little bit more. About a third of you say that you do. Yes, you routinely file SIDs and stars when they're available. That's great. So I'm hoping to invert those numbers here, and we'll see the yes crowd go to 2/3 and no crowd go to 1/3 next time. Have you ever been assigned a SID or star if you didn't file it? Yeah, so over half of you have been assigned a SID or star even though you didn't request one. And this is a big part of ATC's system. It's easier for them because if they assign you a SID or a star, they know they can issue you that one instruction that covers the whole thing, and they don't have to worry about clearing you for every step along the way. They have an expectation that you're going to be able to do it. So, and again, I'm seeing there about 2/3 of you don't file SIDs and stars when they're available. Let's see, I already said that one. Let's see, have you ever run into a problem flying a SID or a star, some kind of a difficulty? And we've got about a quarter of you have run into some sort of a problem. So hopefully the problem children here that I'm going to talk about today will help alleviate some of that concern. So around half of you are saying that you're flying these without too much problem. And I threw that not sure answer in there. A little over a quarter of you have said you're not sure if you've run into a problem flying a SID or a star. So maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Maybe you haven't done them often enough to be able to tell if you've actually made a mistake flying one. So I think that's kind of interesting, but our objective here will be to show you maybe a little bit about how to use a SID or a star a little bit more confidently. So let's see, general tips here. Pick a SID or a star that's coming to and from the direction you're going. And this is easier now than it's ever been. Let me share my iPad screen, and this takes just a couple of moments to do this changeover. And of course, Apple, the latest version of the iOS, has modified the way that this works. I think I need to get some of my stuff off the screen here so you can see this. Okay, and where I was going with this was, here's your pretty picture about what it looks like. That's a SID. This is the one we're going to start with out of Concord-Buchanan Field up in Northern California in the Bay Area. But what I wanted to show you here is, if we look at a flight plan, let me say one here that I've flown from Fullerton to Tucson. I do this route quite often. If I wanted to put a SID or a star on this departure, I've got my flight plan already entered in here. I can just tap on the procedure button, and it's going to show me the departure procedures that I have available out of Fullerton Airport. And if I want to look, say, at the Anaheim departure, these are the transitions available. I can go to Ventura, I can go to Lake Hughes, or I can go to Hector. Well, none of these is really the direction I'm going, so it's not going to do me much good. So if I come back here and take a look at the Hawk 3, how about that one? Well, this is not going to be much good either because it goes off to the west. So in this case, for this particular flight, I don't really have a way to, a good SID that makes sense for me to fly. So this is a very super easy, convenient way to find one that I could work. And in this case, I don't have one. But let's look at the arrivals into Tucson. So if I look at procedures and I want to look at arrivals into Tucson, I've got 2 to choose from here. Now here you can see the Zona 1 is for jets only. So I can look at that one, but I don't have a jet airplane, at least when I'm flying my Cessna 182. So this one is not going to be usable for me. But how about this Dingo 5 arrival? Look at that. This one does make some sense. I can blow it up here a little bit. I'm coming in from the west. That blue line is where I'm coming from. And look, this one has a transition that starts at Gila Bend, goes a little south of Stanfield there. It comes over to Baser intersection, Dingo and Tucson. That arrival would make some sense. So it's easier than ever to find the procedure that we'd like to use. And if I was going to use this one, I would just click that I want the Gila Bend transition, happens to be coming from the direction I'm coming from, and I add that to the route, and presto, it's done. So that really makes things easy. And in this case, I also have the Allman RNAV GPS runway 3. So it's a GPS approach to the northeast there, and the fix there comes off the end of the arrival. And this is one of the frustrations that I find, and I'm sure you've seen this too, that a lot of times you'll end up with a star that ends at a point that doesn't happen to be a point that an approach begins from. And I think they're gradually working on this process, trying to make them link up a little bit better. We're not quite there yet. So we have to just work with the best of it. All right, so that is, let's see our poll results. I'm going to close that. I'm going to see if I can get back to my notes here. This will look a little funny here for a bit. Let me get that over here. Okay, again, I talked about the limitations with the altitudes a little bit ago. They may or may not be printed on the chart. Let's look at this a little bit more. It's going to be easier if I look at it this way and just look at just this procedure, arrival, the Dingo 5, and we get just this procedure. In this case, we don't have any altitudes published on the arrival, so we don't have to worry about that. We'll take a look at some others over the course of the evening here that do have some altitudes, and I posted a question. Some of you may be here because I posted a question in an online forum the other day asking for pointouts to arrival procedures in particular that have altitudes that you as GA pilots have been assigned. So this does happen, and we'll keep an eye on that here as we go. A couple of the other things I wanted to touch on is that we do have two major types of arrival procedures. We have conventional procedures and we have RNAV procedures. If it's an RNAV procedure, it'll say RNAV in the name over here. We'll see some of those along the way. Since this Dingo 5 does not say RNAV, this is considered a conventional procedure. So that's pretty simple, and it doesn't really matter. You can fly them both with your GPS, with your GPS navigator. If it's a WAS navigator, 430W or a 530W, you can fly a conventional procedure using only the RNAV navigator. So let me see here. There are sometimes notes in here that can really matter. This particular one doesn't have any, but we'll see some along the way. The other thing is I want to mostly be spending time with the government charts, because these are no extra costs. They're included with the price of your ForFlight or any other, WingX or Flight Plan Go. It's included for free in your program. The Jeppesen charts have an extra charge with them. So I'm going to focus mostly on these charts.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
There's some people asking about where you're seeing these procedures, and I just think it's worth mentioning that you're looking at ForFlight, and someone asked how you looked at the procedures on the pull down drawer. I think I answered from the flight plan pull out drawer, and then procedures is what you're hitting on. Also, the top of your screen might be blocked by a zoom control panel.
It is actually, let me see if I can move this. I can't move that zoom control panel.
Okay, well, the procedures button on the right side there is what someone was asking about, where you were showing the procedures.
Yeah, I'm on the flight plan tab, as you say. This is where I'm editing the flight plan, and I have this procedure button over on the right hand side, and this is where you can select your departures, arrival, approaches. If you're a VFR pilot, you want to do a holding pattern. If you want to, or I'm sorry, a traffic pattern. And if you want to add a holding pattern somewhere along the way, you can do that with ForFlight. You can't do it with the GNS Navigator. So that's kind of an extra feature. And that may be, is this a Pro Plus only feature, Brian? Do you happen to know off the top of your head?
No, that should be in the basic subscription as well. Also, one person asked a little fuzzy on transitioning from, we look at that entire star transitioning from the SID to the en route phase. If you could discuss that, any clarity on how to think those up.
Let me look at another route here. I got a bunch of fun routes that are in here. Not as many as I used to. I've been kind of cleaning house a little bit here. So when you select a SID, you would hopefully start with a SID, a standard instrument departure, out of your airport. So let's say we want to do this Anaheim 3 departure, and let's say we want to end it at Hector. So that's the procedure we want to do. That would be then the first fix that you would put in the route portion of your flight plan. And if we add this to the route, you put it in your flight plan filing message just like this, Anaheim ANAHM1.HEC. And that is the SID procedure ending at the Hector VOR, the Hector transition. So then you would pick up your en route portion starting from there. So if we were going to do this particular flight, maybe we would zoom in here a little bit more. Maybe we'd file the Anaheim 1 departure, Hector transition, and then Victor 12, which comes over here to some VOR to Needles, maybe to Drake, and then maybe we go down south from there. So maybe that'll be more for another question on how to hook these up. And then we get the same thing on the other end. We have a Victor Airway, let's say, that ends at a fix, Gila Bend in this case, which is where the arrival begins from. So in a perfect world, you would have your destination, or correction, your departure airport, your departure SID with the ending fix on it, and then you'd have Victor Airways and maybe VORs or waypoints or what have you, and then an ending fix or station or what have you for the beginning of the STAR, the standard terminal arrival route, and then you'd have the STAR, then you'd have the approach, and then you'd have the destination airport. And that's all you'd have in there. And I've done flights where you have just departure, SID, STAR, arrival, and that's it. And it's a real nice, clean way to do it. So hopefully that answered that one. And some of these have some notes that are pretty important here. Let me go back to some of these. Let's say let's take a look at this one. This is the Hawk 3 departure out of one of my local airports, Orange County here. It's got a couple of notes here. So radar required. So SoCal Tracon has to be functioning. You got to be able to talk to them, and their radar has to be functioning. You got to have DME IRU, which probably none of us have anymore in our little airplanes, or GPS. So this is one that's an RNAV SID. We can see it up at the top right corner here. So if you don't have a GPS navigator, you cannot do this departure. And you're required to be able to do RNAV1. So this ties into your airplane setup, particularly in ForFlight. When you file your flight plan, you advise the system in your ICAO flight plan form what your navigation capability is. And one of those things should indicate that you have the capability of flying RNAV1. So if you don't have RNAV1, if you don't have any GPS at all, you cannot do it. And it's not authorized for turbojet aircraft. So here's one that is only for little airplanes. So this is us. This particular procedure has caused problems because it's got some specific altitude specified in here. And when you're cleared via this procedure, you will be cleared via the Hawk 3 departure, climb via the SID, maintain 8,000, let's say. So they give you one altitude, but that altitude is not a climb and maintain. That's a climb via the SID. So you have to make all these restrictions that are part of the SID. And that's really beyond the scope of the talk tonight. I just wanted to point out that they're here, that you need to be aware of them, and you need to comply with them when you're given that climb via or descend via clearance. And if you don't understand this, it's a great opportunity to go get with your friendly neighborhood instrument instructor and maybe spend a little time on the ground learning about these climb vias and descend vias. There's some great information online, and I or Brian would be happy to help you in a one-on-one session outside the scope of this talk tonight. So these notes can be pretty important. You might see minimum climb gradients specified in here. I don't know, you might find a whole bunch of other information in here. If you do fly a fast mover that goes into the flight levels, here's another important piece of information: transition altitude, 18,000. This will be the same all the way through the domestic, the lower 48 states, but other countries, if you happen to fly to the Bahamas or Canada or Mexico, they may use a different altitude for that transition altitude. And this is one place where it's written for you. All right, so I mentioned don't just take what the box gives you and fly that. You really do need to look at this procedure. And I'm going to show you a couple examples here where people have gotten into trouble with that. But I want to start out with one that's fairly simple here. We'll go over to this Concord-Buchanan 2 departure. This one's fairly simple. It may not look simple, but when you eliminate all the stuff that doesn't apply to you, it really is fairly simple. We're going to come up against this limitation where I mentioned a moment ago, where the simulator database is out of date. It doesn't match the current charts. Unfortunately, I can't get my simulator database updated. So I've tried to focus just on procedures that are similar enough now to what they were when that database was published back in 2007. So there are a couple very subtle differences, but generally they're the same. So we're going to start with this departure. You can see that we've got our takeoff minimums, which do not apply to standard Part 91 type airplanes, but we've got the departure route description. So you've got all this text here. You take off of these runways, you're going to make a climbing left turn direct to the Concord VOR DME, and then other stuff. And if you take off a 3-2 right, you're going to make a climbing right turn direct to the Concord VOR DME, and then the stuff, the transition or the assigned route. So that's this lower portion of the procedure right here. You come off of any runway, particularly these two, you're going to make a left turn direct to VOR. You come off of this one, you're going to make a right turn. And then we're going to do something else. This particular procedure is a little complicated in that it goes a couple directions, different directions. You can go off to the east and northeast, or you can go to the west, a couple of different places here. You can go to Skaggs Island, you can go to Croit, or you can go to Sablo. So you can tell that these are courses that are part of the procedure because they have an MEA, they have a course line, and they have a distance. This particular one out here to Croit is even on a Victor Airway, Victor 108. So you're going to do this and you're going to end up at the VOR. And then if you're doing the Croit transition, you're going to fly the Concord 259 degree radial out to Croit intersection. The Pitts transition does this, and the Rejoy transition does this, and so forth. So that's all fairly straightforward, right? Top altitude assigned by ATC. So you're going to get an altitude that is included in your clearance. Some departure procedures have an altitude published there, and if they just say climb via the SID, they will not tell you another altitude. That's the one that you're cleared to. So you have to know that, and that's part of why you need to have this procedure available in front of you. So now let's switch to the Navigator here, and let's see, where did it go? There we are. So here's my handy dandy little GPS navigator. I happen to be using a 530 tonight. I know most of you are using the 430s, and some of you, I know I felt a little left out that I'm not spending as much time with the 430, and I'd like to do that. But the display, the map is just that much nicer on the 530. The buttonology, the button pushes and the sequences are the same between the two. The only difference is going to be, at least for what we're doing here, is going to be these navigation pages. It comes up on page 2, which is a nice little map mode here. You're kind of a little bit below the center. You can see all this stuff on it. Map page 1, I like to use this one a lot. It's got the 100 and whatever degree compass rose here. But for our purposes, we'll look at this. And we're going to look at in order to load the procedure, you just touch the procedure button. And so far, in the other programs that we've done, we've talked about selecting an approach. Well, tonight we're talking about departures to start with anyway. So let's select a departure procedure. So we come down here and notice it knows that we're at that airport. So it's going to start with the Concord Airport. Later on, as we get into other procedures, it might start somewhere else, and we're going to have to go up there and change the airport. But in this case, we're going to look at this Buchanan 8. Now, you remember the chart I just showed you was the Buchanan 2, and that number will be caused when they make a major revision to the procedure. They'll increase it from that 8 to the 9 to the 1 to the 2. So the current procedure is now the 2. So, you know, it's a little bit newer than the one that's in the Navigator. But in this particular case, it's close enough for us. We're going to work with it. So we got the Buchanan 8. Now it needs to know which runway we're going to come off of. And if you remember when we looked at the diagram, it had different headings that came off of different runways. There were more of them in the earlier procedure, or this particular procedure only has the one off of runway 1 left and 1 right. The current procedure has instructions for off of more runways. So this is one reason why you want to stay up to date. So in this case, let's just select runway 1 left. And now we have to tell it which transition do we want to do. And I wanted to do the Skaggs Island transition. So we just big knob down here, move the cursor to Skaggs Island. That's the one we want. We press enter. And so now we get, just like we did when we loaded approaches, we're going to get an overview of this whole departure procedure. You can see the major points on it. The skinny lines are the other segments that we did not select. The thick line is the one that we did select. So does that go up to Skaggs Island? Is that what we want? Then yep, that looks pretty good. And we select enter on load. And just like when we loaded an approach procedure, when we load the departure procedure, it takes us to the flight plan, to page 1, to our active flight plan. And it says, okay, you're coming off of runway 1 left, and it's going to navigate directly to Concord, and then it's going to go out to Skaggs Island. So it's another opportunity to look at this and verify that it's what we want. So push the flight plan button, then we come back to the nav page and we can look at this, and you see there's our airport. And you remember the procedure said left turn or right turn direct to Concord VOR, and then via the rest of the procedure. So here we are. Presto, it's ready to go. That's all you need to do. Now, if we were to start flying this, and let's give it some altitude here. Let's go, say 3,000 feet. We're in the nav mode here. So the navigator is going to track that. It's going to go to the Concord VOR. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up. We're only 3 miles away. It happens to be pretty close in. And then it will do that turn. So instead of ATC having to say after departure, turn left heading 360 direct Concord, and then the Concord, whatever it is, 281 radial to Skaggs Island, instead they can just say cleared via the Buchanan 2 departure, and that does all of that. So much simpler, I think. So this is a nice simple one. There's no altitudes on it. There's no headings on it. Everything's all taken care of. You're tracking a course essentially from immediately after takeoff. And this particular procedure is fairly simple. There's not a lot to it. So some of them, though, get really interesting and involved with a lot more waypoints. So there's an opportunity for a lot of simplicity and just making your whole life simple if you use the procedure instead.
Time for a quick question or two, Mike?
Sure.
One of them is you picked a SID and a transition and loaded it, but you pulled the wrong one. How do you back out and load the right one?
Okay, let's take a look at that. It's a good one. It's a little complex sometimes. We'll come down here, select the departure. So let's say we accidentally clicked the CANA 2 and we're coming off of this other runway, let's say, and we have that transition. So is that the one we wanted to do? Oh, no, I got the wrong one. So instead of pressing enter with load highlighted, we'll take the big knob back up here into the departure box, click the little knob, and it gives you the option to change this back to the other one that we wanted. And then we can come down here again. After you select the procedure, it takes you to the runway. Some of these procedures, you'll see some later on, will say runway all. So no matter which runway you come off of, the procedure is the same, but whichever it is, pick the runway that you think you're going to take off on or that you want to take off on. And then make sure you've got the correct transition selected again. We wanted Skaggs Island. Highlight that. Now you look at that again. Yeah, that's the one we wanted. and press enter. So the key, and this is the same thing you do in a procedure with the selecting an approach procedure. If you selected the wrong one, just highlight that box and twist the little knob. Remember that the little knob changes what the cursor is blinking on. The big knob moves the cursor. The little knob changes what's behind the cursor.
And so a couple of questions on what if you've already loaded it?
Well, if you've already loaded it, then you can go back out and load another one. That's what we did. In fact, sorry?
Yeah, so just load a different one the same way, go through the same process, and then load it. It will replace the other one.
Yeah, we had the Buchanan 8 departure loaded here. And let's say that I do this, excuse me, and I select this other departure and I load it. Well, look at this. Here we are flying along. We're already going by that waypoint. So you really want to avoid doing this in the air. You'd rather do it on the ground before takeoff. And this is the situation where this might happen is, let's say you're taxi out for takeoff and you get your clearance and you're taking off on one runway. Let's say you're taking off to the north. Well, now the winds change around as you taxi out. They instruct you to taxi to the other runway. You're departing to the south now, and they might give you a new SID. So you've already got the old one loaded in the flight plan. You can just go to that same procedure button and come down here to select departure and make sure you have the correct departure selected. And if you don't remember what you selected, let's go ahead and get rid of that. You can just come up here, push the flight plan button, go to your active flight plan, and you see that it says you're doing the departure as the Kana 2 departure off of this runway. So it's another opportunity to verify that you've got the right thing there.
And you can do the same thing if you're given a different transition, I suppose.
Yep.
After what about after takeoff, once you're flying it and you get a different transition?
Yeah, you can do that. Let's say, okay, we're doing this. Let's take a look at that. We select this departure. The Kana 2 is good. The runway was good. Instead of Croy, let's say we want the Manteca transition. So let's select that one. That's clear over here, the other direction. Let's load that one instead. So now it's, I don't know what CC is, but now it's navigating us from Oki direct to Manteca. Let's see what this looks like on the map page. Oh, we got nothing here. So we've already flown way past where this procedure was. This looks like, oh, CC actually is an NDB there, it looks like. Wow. But so now you have to kind of clean up the mess that got made. So you come back to your active flight plan, push this cursor button, give yourself this cursor. We want to move the cursor down to the waypoint that we want to activate. So now we want to go to this NDB and just type direct, select direct that waypoint. Is that what we want? Yeah, that looks good. Enter, activate. It's going to be a course of 086. We can do that. And now it's navigating to that NDB and it's going to go along the departure and we're on our merry way. So that's how that would work. Okay, so let me show you one that's caused a little bit of consternation here. Let me stop this thing and I will set our position back to my home airport. I know you guys are getting tired of seeing Fullerton in here, but that's my backyard. That's where I know. I've been flying out of here for almost 40 years now. Actually, probably exactly 40 years, which is a scary thing. Now, I'm going to delete this flight plan. So I push the flight plan, I push menu, and I scroll down to delete flight plan and press enter. Do I really want to delete the whole flight plan? Yep, I do. And I'm going to select a different procedure. So we come down here, procedure, select departure, and we're out of Fullerton. There's really, this Navigator only has the one procedure in the departure database. It's the Anaheim 3. Currently, we're back on Anaheim 1, I believe. We'll take a look at it in just a second, but I want to show you this first. If you were just to load this procedure, let's say we're departing off of runway 24, and Hector transition, no, let's do the Lake Hughes transition, just for kicks. And so here's what it looks like. I can't really scroll there. We'll see on the map page in a second. But we come off of the Fullerton, and you can kind of see it's got little heading, little dashed lines there, and then it's got all these airways that go out to all these intersections out there. So you just look at that. Yeah, that's right. We got Poxq, we got Beiji, we got Darts, we got Lake Hughes. Poxq is about 1.5 miles that away, by the way. It's right by my house. So let's load this procedure, and here's what you get. takes you to the flight plan, and notice the flight plan is going to show us departing off of runway 24, going direct to Seal Beach, direct POX-Q, direct Bay G, direct darts, direct Lake Hughes, and so forth. So already I've got kind of a red flag raising up here, because this is going to navigate me directly to Seal Beach, and that's probably not what I want. Here's what the Navigator looks like. If I zoom in on that, and what I want to show you here is, what does the procedure look like on the map? So I've got to change back over to my ForFlight here for a moment. New share. We'll share that one instead. Standby one. Okay, so we come into ForFlight. I'm at the Fullerton page. I'm looking at my departures, and I want to look at the Anaheim one on the FAA chart. So here's what it looks like. And notice that that departure procedure out of Fullerton off of either runway is a heading 120. It's not direct Seal Beach. And notice also that this is page 1 of 2. So we have another page, it's a text page, it's a little bit more clear. Also notice in this case, we have a top altitude that's specified of 2,000 feet. We've also got a couple of NOTAMs. So let's look at these. We've got a SID here that applies to this departure. It says you can't do the Ventura transition except for aircraft equipped with suitable RNAV system with GPS. Well, guess what? I've got a Garmin GNS 530W. I've got a suitable RNAV system with GPS, so I can do this even though that VOR is out of service. And if we scroll down here a little bit, we have a little older one. Actually, this is coming up here soon. Looks like that VOR is going to be out of service. This is weird. It says effective February 1st, but expires January 19. Maybe it was effective last February. So same thing in any event. The Lake Hughes VOR is out of service. So unless we have one of these navigators, we cannot do this procedure. So we do, we're good. So let's look at page 2 on this procedure. And look off, we said we were going to depart off of runway 24. And these instructions are turn left heading 120, radar vectors to Seal Beach. And then the assigned transition or route, maintain 2,000, expect filed altitude in 10 minutes. And those of you who've ever flown out of Fullerton Airport, you know this is exactly the departure clearance you get virtually every departure out of Fullerton. So you got to remember this. This is a heading that the Navigator cannot help you with. Let's go back over to the Navigator here and bring this back up. So our pink line is navigating directly to Seal Beach. Well, that's not what we can do. So how are we going to get out of this mess? If we instead select the heading over to 120, and we're going to take our autopilot, we're going to fly it in heading mode, and let's start flying. We'll go down to 2,000. So as the airplane starts to go, this should start to spin around here. Wow, it looks like is it actually moving? Yeah, kind of. So we're just going to ignore this pink leg for the moment. And we're going to expect to get radar vectors to Victor 8, which is this line right here. And as we fly along on this departure, we fly this heading, and some of you who've flown with me who are on this meeting right now, you've seen the range of vectors that they'll give you. We've done everything from a whole 270 to never intercepting it to everything in between. It's just crazy sometimes. So the way we're going to do this, once we do get the clearance that says on your present heading, intercept Victor 8 to POX-Q, here's what we do. We come to the flight plan, we give ourselves a cursor, we're going to scroll down here to POX-Q, we're going to click the menu button, and the first item in that menu is activate leg. That's what we want to do. We want to fly from Seal Beach to POX-Q. Does that sound right? Yeah, sounds right to me. So now we've got that pink line in front of us. That's the leg we want to intercept. We've got our autopilot is in heading mode. Once we get kind of close to it, then we're going to click it over into nav mode, and the Navigator will track that, and we're on our way, and all life is a sunny day. So the takeaway from this part of it is you have to be very careful when you have a procedure that starts with or ends with a heading. You have to manually fly that heading. And we're going to see an example coming up right now that I know Brian was involved with, helped the FAA out doing some publicizing of this situation. So let's take a look at that. Let me stop this thing. And we're going to go up to Van Nuys now. Any questions relating to this right now? I see David's asking what's the difference between a graphical ODP and a SID. One thing is, so far as I know, ODPs or obstacle departure procedures are not available in the database. So you have to manually fly it. It's just a pretty picture in front of you that you can see. But I haven't yet found one that I can select out of the database. Also, you don't need a clearance to fly an ODP. You do to fly a SID. That's other stuff beyond the scope of the discussion tonight. Yeah, some FMSs you can load it, but not all of them. Yeah, Barry mentions, although the takeoff minimums, the weather minimums for takeoff do not apply to Part 91, the climb requirements do apply. That's absolutely right. If there's a minimum climb gradient that's in that notes section of the departure procedure, you need to make sure that you know what that is and what that feet per minute is going to turn into for your airplane, and that you can comply with it. And if you can't comply with it, you need to tell ATC and come up with a plan B, whatever that plan is. Does the box give you the correct turn direction based off of the runway you select? I believe so, but remember, if the initial part of the procedure is a vectored heading, the GNS navigators don't do real well with that. GTNs do better, IFDs do better, but the GNSs are really not very good.
My answer to that one is yes, but.
That's a great answer. Trust but verify. Make sure. And if it starts to turn the wrong way, then you need to be the pilot and you need to make it turn the right way.
Right.
Judy asks, I gather you wouldn't actually get to Seal Beach before proceeding. Almost always we get a vector somewhere other than Seal Beach. I did get to Seal Beach one time in the last month and a half or so, in about a half a dozen flights at least. So it's pretty rare. So this is why it's really important to know how to get into the flight plan on the Navigator to activate the leg that you want to do. You need to be pretty deft with that Navigator. Show that step on activating the leg again, Brian. Yes, we'll probably see that again here coming up very shortly. So stand by and we'll get to that. So the next one I want to show is Van Nuys. I'm going to set our position down to the Van Nuys airport. Oops, I'm doing this the wrong way. This one. Why is it doing that? Oh, I know why it's doing that. I think I know why it's doing that.
Supposed to say, there it goes again.
Yeah. For those of you who don't remember, what's the difference between a new pilot and an old pilot? The new pilot says, what's it doing now? And the old pilot says, look, it's doing it again. And boy, have I seen that a lot. So we're going to set ourselves on the ground in Van Nuys. And now let's clear this flight plan out of here. And I happen to have loaded a flight plan. We're in the flight plan catalog on page 1 here, a flight plan button in page 1. We go to page 2, we get the catalog. And I have the Van Nuys departure with the Avenal transition. And so if I press menu and activate this flight plan, now we come back to our active flight plan and we're on page 1. We're going to depart runway 16 right, and the Navigator says direct to Biho. And this is another example, one of those that is problematic here. And let's see, Brian, if you feel like chiming in on this one. I know this one's near and dear to your heart.
Okay.
Well,
I know that one of the big problems with this one is that it's a very simple SID, but there are a lot of deviations on it. It's just fly a heading to a certain point and then fly a different heading, and that's all it is. But the problem comes in how the GNS and GPSs and FMSs are displaying it on the display. So it's important to look at the plate and read it and understand it. Yep.
And here's the plate. This is the FAA version of the plate. We've got one NOTAM on it, which says, okay, climb on a heading 163. Let's stand by just a moment on that. So here's the picture off of the runway. If we're departing off of 16 right, we see 163. And this was Brian's question he asked me this morning when we were looking at this. And that question is that a heading or a course? And the government chart does not make it plain. We notice also we've got page 1 of 2. So this is another procedure where we have 2 pages on this thing. So let's look at page 2. We have our departure route description. Off of runways 16 left and right, climb on a heading 163 until the Van Nuys 2.2 DME. And I wrote this note in here. This is where that NOTAM comes into play. It says cross the Fillmore 102 or Van Nuys 2.2 at or below 1,700. Then climbing right turn to 213. Okay, so I put a note here at or below 1,700. Then climbing right turn heading 213 for radar vectors to Ipiho and thence. So the key here again is you're flying a heading until they tell you to do something different. Don't go to Ipiho until they tell you to. And if we go back at this procedure here, you can see we're on our 163 heading to 2.2 or that radial off of Fillmore. Then heading 213 and this arrow just keeps on going. So here's Ipiho right here. Don't go there until they tell you to. So a couple of notes.
And what a lot of pilots are doing is off of that 213 heading, if they haven't been given a new heading by ATC, they for some reason think they need to intercept the 323 radial off Los Angeles and proceed up to Ipiho, but that's not what you're supposed to do. There is a procedure for if you lose your comm to go ahead and do that. But that would be in a loss of comm situation, not when ATC hasn't changed your heading.
Right. And the distinction here is, and you see it on this one as well, these are just radials for informational purposes. They're not for navigation. And the reason you can tell that is because it doesn't have a altitude or a distance on it. It only has a radial. So this is a course you can fly. This is a piece of information. And if you look in the aeronautical chart user's guide, it will illustrate this distinction. Or if you're a user of JEP charts, look in the manuals there that talk about those procedures and you'll see. So the bottom line here is do not intercept that line. This is not a flyable course. So let's go back to the Navigator here and see what it looks like. This is what the flight plan looks like, and it says runway direct Ipiho on a 268 course. So this is really not what we want to do. And then to Costa, Gorman, and so on. Let's look at this message, set course and do not use. Okay, we won't. Push the flight plan button. We'll come back to the map and let's zoom in on this. Okay, so we happen to be looking south. Actually, I want to zoom out a little bit. Notice again, that pink line goes direct Ipiho. This is what the 530 is going to show you to do. And if you follow it, you're going to get a pilot deviation. You're going to get violated. You're going to have some paperwork to do. And I don't know about you, but I don't like doing paperwork. So instead, we're going to set our heading bug here. The initial heading was 163. So set that over here and we'll put our autopilot here in the heading mode. And we have to cross that fix at or below 1700. So now we can start flying. It's going to take a couple of moments to make this turn to southbound and get us on our way. So for the initial portion of your flight, you're going to be flying a heading, and that's okay. All life is not about GPSs. So sometimes we have to, it doesn't look like that thing's moving over, does it? Let's see. Oops, this page. It's still going off in La La Land. The simulator's acting weird. So on the page 1, it looks like we're heading the proper direction. But we're not on that pink line. And you can see the deviation bar is moving over. We're getting farther and farther away from the course. And that's okay. We're expecting that. When we get to the altitude and the radial that we're going to be monitoring, if we're really good, what we would do is we'll dial in the VOR over here. Oops, 113.1. And we'll make that active. And now we've got the VOR, we've got our distance, so we're beyond that 2.2. So now we can make this turn over to 213. And we're just going to fly this until we get instructions from ATC. And at some point, ATC is going to say something like, all right, you're cleared direct IPHO, resume the departure, climb and maintain 8,000 feet. So at that point now, we're going to go direct IPHO. So we just click direct IPHO, activate. Yeah, that looks good. That's what we want to do. And we put it back in nav mode. The navigator will fly IPHO and fly the rest of the departure. Now, if I can just touch back on the other question that somebody asked a moment ago about going through this routine of activating the leg. Let me do that while we're here. We just bring up the flight plan. Let's say we want to activate this leg from IPHO to CASTA instead. And we were on the flight plan on page 1, the active flight plan. And we push it, get ourselves a cursor. We use the big knob to move the cursor down to the waypoint that we want to activate. Once it's highlighting the correct fix here, we just click menu. And the top item in that menu says activate leg. So we click on that. It says, do we want to fly from IPHO to CASTA? Is that good? Yep, that's good. And now we see the next one is active and the navigator will start with that. I would refer you back to probably the part 3 and part 4 and 5. 5 in particular, I spent a lot of time on approaches. And this is a really important skill, a fundamental, I would say, skill in using the Garmin 430 and 530 to perform instrument approaches. You have to know how to do this.
Mike?
Yes.
Got a question. How did you determine the 2.2 DME point to make that turn?
And if you notice right here on the left side of the navigator, I've selected 113.1, which is the frequency for the Van Nuys VOR. It has identified it as the Van Nuys VOR, and we have a distance that's marked off of it right here.
And will you still see that on a 430?
On a 430, you will not. So on a 430, what you could do, really the only thing you could do would be to, again, tune in well, this time you'd have to use the Fillmore VOR and use that radial that we saw on the more recent procedure. Or, well, another way you could do it actually, if we come over here to nearest, and if we select the nearest VOR page, you have the distance on there. And that will work also on a 430. So that's another way.
I saw someone ask if that would work if the VOR was out of service, but if it was, you wouldn't have a distance. You wouldn't, the SID would not be a usable SID.
Well, but remember that one NOTAM that we had said you couldn't do the Fillmore transition because that VOR was out of service. So yes, you can do that with this navigator because it is an acceptable substitute because it's a WAS navigator.
Right, right.
If you had a non-WAS navigator, you could not do that. So yes, you could do that even with the station out of service. And it talks about that in the AIM. I want to say it's section 123.
Right.
Happens to be conveniently numbered, the one that has, but the allowable uses for, acceptable uses for GPSs.
Right. So if the the GNS 430 is a substitute for DME, how would you get that distance without the VOR working?
Yeah, and the answer is you come over to the nearest and pull up VOR, and you'll only see the top, 8, well, whatever number is on this nearest page. It's page 4.
Nice pro tip.
Yeah, and that's really the only other way I know to do that. So I've used this on occasion in a number of different ways, and maybe that might be fodder for a future discussion. So okay, that's the Van Nuys procedure. And let me just quickly show another one that causes problems. I participate in a group in Arizona, and called the Arizona. Oh, help me out, Lee. I think Lee's probably on the call here, and she's going to get really angry with me that I forget. Arizona Safety Action Group, I believe, is what it's called, and they discuss a lot of procedures and things going on in the state that are causing problems. And this Deer Valley procedure has been all over the news here lately, basically. And this is an ancient procedure. Let me go, we're on the nav waypoint page. That's the problem here. I want to be back on the nav page. So we're on the ground at Deer Valley. While we do that, let me show you this procedure. And you'll see, I'm going to switch back over to my ForFlight here just to show you this procedure. And give it a moment here to come up. And okay, close. did I save this one? Yeah, here's the Deer Valley one. And this is an obstacle departure procedure. This one actually is recallable from the database. So the earlier question, not often are the obstacle procedures in the database, but when they are, they can be problematic. And this one, every month, there's at least 2 pilot deviations on this procedure. So you can see what's going on here. Either runway you take off and you need to turn to the northeast and intercept this radial off of Phoenix, the 336 radial. And notice again, this does not have a distance or an MEA on it. So this is not a flyable course. This is just a reference point. Now here it does become one. And the instruction is, if we look at the procedure here, climbing left turn or climbing right turn, north to the Phoenix vortex, 336 degree radial northwest bound to 4,000, and then climbing visual conditions or so forth, you end up with a climbing left turn direct to Phoenix vortex. And the way this looks at is we're going to take off, say, to the west. You make a right turn heading 060, intercept this radial until you've managed to climb up to 4,000 feet, and then make your left turn and come back around direct to Phoenix. Do not turn to the south. And the problem with this is there's a whole bunch of other airports just to the south and east of here, Scottsdale and then Phoenix, and you interfere with all that traffic on the way in. But people are doing that. And here's why. If we switch back over to the Navigator, this was a great way to do this live. If we come in here and we're going to go to the flight plan, and I'm going to start with clearing this procedure out. We'll empty our flight plan. And we'll come to the procedure button, and we're going to select our departure. And it says, hey, we're at Deer Valley. We must want a Deer Valley procedure. In this old database, there is only one procedure. There can be only one. Let's say we take off at 25 left is the runway we're using. And there's only one transition, so it doesn't give us the option to change that. And do we want to load that? We say, sure, let's load that. So we go from runway 25 left, direct Phoenix on a 150, right? This should be sending the hair on the back of your neck standing straight up. Notice we've got our 4,000 feet fixed down here, but it just gets all screwed up in the Navigator. And here's what it looks like. Again, we're kind of facing to the north. We want to take off from this runway. Let me zoom in a bit more. Let's see if we see anything on here. Yeah, so it's going from the beginning of 25 left, and it's going directly to the Phoenix VOR. That's really not what we want to do. So here's another procedure that starts with a heading that the GNS navigators just don't know how to do. So the answer is, just like we did with the other ones, we'll set our heading bug here to 060. And we'll make sure that we're in heading mode when we take off and we start flying. And it's going to take it a moment to turn back over there. And we're going to have to basically manually navigate this first portion of the procedure. And we get the message, it's flashing. It says set course to 150. We're going to hold off on that a little bit. So heading actually, yeah. So normally we would have been heading over this direction somewhere, kind of to the west. Remember, every departure procedure assumes that you're going to cross the departure end of the runway at 35 feet and then climb to at least 400 feet above the field and then do your first turn. So it doesn't matter what else is out there, unless there's some other exception to it, 400 feet and then turn. So that's what we're going to do.
OBS mode here? Some people are asking about that.
You could use OBS mode, yeah, as a matter of fact. Let's explore that. And that's great, actually. Thanks for reminding me of this.
Sure.
I'll stop it. Let me make this thing stop complaining about the terrain. We could use the OBS mode. We tap OBS and let's see, we're going to intercept the 336. So we're going to give ourselves a pink line here. That's the line we want to intercept. Let me see, I need to make the heading come over here. Yeah, it's going to complain about heading because guess what? Or terrain rather. There is terrain around here. And if we look at page 3, look at that. The red stuff is above us. The yellow stuff is less than 1,000 feet below us. So there's really terrain here. So we want to be getting up here 4,000 feet when we turn. And as we do that, as we climb, you see the red turn to yellow and then eventually turn to black. And we can't tell from here what altitude we're actually at. Well, actually, we do have this GPS altitude here. So once we see 4,000 in here, we can start manually do our turn over to the west. So for now, we just have this 336 radial that extends out to infinity. I don't think, because this is not pink, I'm not sure you could use the nav mode. I think it would probably try to fly back towards the station. I don't trust it. So at this point in time, I'm going to use heading. So when I get to 4,000 feet, which, oh, that's close enough here, 4,000 feet. Now I take the heading bug, I slew it around to the left. I make this left turn. Now the instruction on the departure was left turn direct Phoenix. So I can take it out of OBS mode now. I can go direct. It says, do you want to go direct to Phoenix? Yeah, that sounds good. Let's activate that. It's got the turn there. Now we can put it right into nav mode, and it'll navigate the rest of the departure for us just great. So let's see. Patrick's asking about, they give you a heading to intercept a Victor Airway, proceed en route. Display the low altitude as an overlay versus a black screen. No, it's not going to show your altitude. It really doesn't do a whole lot of GPS, but the programming, the GPS, if you've already got that Victor Airway loaded in, it's a 430 or 530. It doesn't know about Victor Airways, but assuming you've got the points of the airway loaded, then you just activate the leg that's ahead of you. It's just on the difference, activate leg versus direct. Yeah, this is still confusing to people. What I've been using here, what I did on this last one was I went direct to the Phoenix. That was the direct to the fix. In a couple other cases, I showed to activate the leg. And this is why I teach them differently now. If you're in the flight plan and you want to go direct to Phoenix, we highlight Phoenix down here. You press direct to Phoenix. Is that what we want to do? Activate. Yep, that's what we want to do. If we wanted to activate a leg instead, what I have been teaching lately is, and here's how I make the distinction. I highlight the fix and I click menu and I click activate leg. There is another way to do it, but I think it's more confusing. So that's the distinction, and it's really important to know that. If you're on an instrument approach and ATC has told you intercept the final cleared for the approach, and if you click direct to the fix that's in front of you, that's incorrect. You didn't intercept it. You went direct to the fix, and you're not established on the correct navigation. So it's really important.
Jim Gandy was saying if you're not seeing a magenta line in OBS, try twisting the CDI 180 degrees.
Yeah, you can twist it until you get it right. Let's see what happens here. So if we're in nav mode and I've got it set on a 330, so it's going to turn around and fly that 330. Even though the pink is down here, it's going to fly the course I have selected. It wants that pointer, the course pointer, to be at the front. So it's kind of an oddball. Now, if I spin it around the other way, so I've got the pink line at the top, and that's what I'm flying to the station. It just gets kind of confusing, and I'm a believer in using the heading bug and taking control of the situation. Okay, I want to switch to departure. Look at that. We're already over an hour, Brian, and I haven't even gotten halfway through. It happened again.
So much good stuff.
Well, it's fun too, and it's really interesting, and this is important. Pilots are getting themselves in trouble, and people have been killed for following the wrong navigation before. So this stuff is important. I'm going to not spend a whole lot of time on a lot of arrival procedures. They're kind of the same thing, but I want to show you just a couple here, and I'll show you the Bakersfield Fasto 2. It's the same as the old Alta Arvin 1 arrival. This is one of those things where I got the old database in here. So, okay. So if we go to flight plan, actually, I think I've got this one saved. Was I a good boy and saved it? Nope, I wasn't. Rats. So come back over here to clear this. All waypoints, yep. So we're going to go to procedure. We're going to select an arrival now, and the procedure is the same. We're going to come up here to this box. We're going to set it to the airport that we want to arrive at. Bakersfield, the Arvin 1, and let's pick the Lake Hughes transition. So this is what it looks like, and if you look at the plate, it looks just like that. So we go to activate it, we go to nav, we give it some speed. Here's our waypoints, Lake Hughes, Ibwin, Lebec, and so forth. And what's it doing now? Or look, it's doing it again. So this says we got 70, oh, it's going direct to Phoenix. No, don't do that. Make it go direct to Lake Hughes instead. So you can kind of see the arrival now. It's loaded the procedure. It's all the same there. And this was a nice simple procedure. Here it is. This one is pretty straightforward, although it does get a little bit involved with some of the lost comm type situation. But if we start down here at Lake Hughes, we're going to fly this course. Notice we got altitudes, we got a course, we got a distance. So that's a flyable course over to Ibwen and then north to Lebec and then to Fasto. And the current procedure, or the old procedure, was Arvin, and that's what's in the Navigator database. So that's what we're doing. It's pretty straightforward. There's no runways to choose from. This is an arrival that works for any runway at the airport. We don't have any notes. We have the note about radar and DME required, but we've got a GPS that's a suitable substitute. We've got our instructions down here, fly these radials to these intersections, and that's all good. And then from over Fasto, fly the localizer for the ILS or localizer for 30 right procedure. So it takes you all the way onto the approach. Well, then we got the question here, what if you're in a lost comm situation? So from Fasto, go to JUPEX, maintain 2500, intercept and execute the approach. If unable, proceed to JUPEX and hold. Okay, so we're going to get to JUPEX up here and we're going to do the procedure right in there. But if we can't do that for whatever reason, we're going to hold. How long are we going to hold? Eventually, we're going to have to land. We can't hold there forever. So that's on you as the pilot to figure out what you want to do. One of the procedures that somebody told me that they have been getting, and this adds the other bit of interesting thing that I wanted to show you. This is a procedure into the Olympia, Washington area. It takes you into Boeing Field or Seattle, Tacoma, a couple airports up in the Puget Sound area. So we have this procedure that's going to start either at Newburgh, that's all the way down in Oregon, or Battleground, it's right by Portland. They're both going to join up here at Olympia, which is well southwest of the Seattle area. And then they're going to fly inbound here. We're going to end up at Fort intersection. And then there's a fork in the road at Fort. Do we go left or do we go right? And this procedure now, again, notice this is page 1 of 2. So let's see what's on page 2. And page 2 says, if we're landing north at Seattle, depart Fort heading 070 for vectors to final. And if we're landing south, fly heading 343 for vectors to final. So we come back over here. So here's our 070, here's our 343. So when you get cleared for this arrival, they're going to say, cleared for the Olympia 2 arrival, landing north or landing south. And your readback needs to be, Roger, cleared for the Olympia 2 arrival, landing south. And now you both are on the same page. You know that once you get to Fort intersection, you're going to go north and you're going to land to the south. If you don't include that, when you get switched to the next frequency and you check in there, you say, I'm descending via the Olympia 2 arrival, ATC is just going to say, confirm you're on the Olympia 2 arrival landing south, and you just have to say it again. So that is now a part of your clearance procedure, and you need to read that back with each successive controller. And that just cuts down on the confusion on the frequency. So let's see if I can switch back over to a Navigator and take a look at this one. Oop, we're still flying. We got terrain here. We're going really fast. We're flying like a bat out of hell. We are going to come here to the nav page. We're going to delete the flight plan. And I'm going to reset our position. And the good news is if I'm going too fast here, there will be a recording of this, and you can look at it online and use the pause button. Pause or rewind work great. BLI, right? Or was this BFI? I think it's BFI. So Boeing Field, that'll work. Okay, so we're over Boeing Field. We're going to select the procedure. Again, we push the procedure button. We spin our knob down here to select arrival. We're going into, well, it still has the old airport there. So here's where we need to spin the knobs around here and change this to BFI now. And we're going to do the Olympia 5 arrival. And now we have to tell it which transition. So do we want Battleground or do we want Newburgh? Let's take Battleground just for kicks. Now we have to tell it which runway we want. So let's say we're landing south. We're going to use the runway 13 procedure. So that's what it looks like. Battleground, Olympia, RVAD, Fort, and then heading off to the north. So does that look good? Yeah, that looks good. And here's our procedure. Let's say we're vectored in here somewhere and we want to intercept this procedure outbound from Olympia into Lacey. It's actually RVAD. You don't have that here. So we come down here to RVAD, we highlight that, to menu, activate leg. Yeah, that's the leg we want to activate. From Olympia to RVAD. Yeah, that's good. So here's our leg and we'll start flying and away we go. We're in nav mode, it's going to track that. Now, we still have the problem though that we go to the flight plan here. Once we get to Fort, it's just going to fly a 011 heading direct to the airport. It's not going to fly that 343. So here again, when you've got a heading as a part of the instructions in the procedure, you need to fly that heading yourself. Arriving at waypoint. Where's it arriving now? We're 21 miles from the waypoint. It's all confused. So that's the big takeaway. When you got a heading leg, which the only way you can tell sometimes is you need to look at the paper procedure and compare to what's in your nav database and make sure it's correct. Let's see, Mark is asking if there are no suitable arrivals from your direction. Can you file to a fix on an arrival that puts you in good position from which to initiate an approach? Absolutely, you can. You can file pretty much anything you want. Or if there's no procedure that makes sense, a SID or a STAR, I will usually just file to the initial approach fix of the approach that I want to do at the destination and just forget about the procedures altogether. So
you just need to make sure that your routing to that fix meets all obstacle clearance criteria, yep. Or especially if there's a Victor airway going to that fix, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, it's another case where you're not on a published route at that point. So you're on your own to make sure that you can comply with any altitude requirements, terrain and obstruction clearance requirements. And it won't take care of you after that. So Judy says she's got to go. Bye, Judy. It's good to see you here. Thanks for coming. She's one of our mega supporters. So thank you very much for that. It's good to see you. Now, do we have time to dive into the extra credits section here in the ODP?
I think so.
All right.
So we've got a pretty good audience here. I think they're clinging to get more information from us. So I'd say go for it.
All right. Well, let's do this. And again, if it's too long for you, then you'll get a emailed link to you here probably sometime tomorrow that's going to have the video, a link to the video. You can go back and rewatch it, and you can hit the pause button, hit the rewind button, whatever you want to do. Okay.
And maybe post in the chat what you think about this time starting an hour earlier. Those on the East Coast might be more, this might be more convenient, but let us know.
Yeah, and sorry about that. I forgot to change the time zone. It's still 00 Zulu, which is what the last several have been, but I forgot about that. We went on to daylight savings time. So we ended up with an earlier start time. Okay, so a clearance is available, advised and ready to copy. We are on the ground at Brackett Airport, and we're going to fly to Fullerton. This is a flight I've done just a couple of times in the last couple of weeks with my instrument student. And here's your clearance. It's one of the most complex ones you'll get around here for an 18-mile flight. You're cleared to the Fullerton Airport. Fly the Brackett runway 26 departure procedure to Prado intersection, Victor 16 Paradise. The Paradise 270 degree radial to Dowd intersection, Victor 394 Seal Beach direct. Climb and maintain 4,000. Departure frequency 125.5 and squawk 4698.
You lost me at the Paradise radial.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a confusing clearance. And the first time I got this, when I got back into GA flying, that was, my head exploded with that. It's a very confusing one. So let me first take you back over to my ForFlight here, and iPad, and I'll show you what this looks like. Come on, you could do it. Here we go. Okay, on the maps, I've got I believe I saved this one. Yeah, here's the route. Let me take the IFR chart out from underneath it here. So this is what it looks like. We're going to take off from Pomona. We're going to start with the runway 26 obstacle departure procedure. How did we get here? So let me show you. Yeah, actually what I want is we're over here. Pomona. Oh, I don't have Pomona starred. So procedure, departure, takeoff minimums. And we're looking at Brackett Airport. So we look at the takeoff minimums, and we got to go forward a couple of pages to Laverne, believe it or not. It's not in Pomona. So here's Laverne, Brackett Field, departure procedure. So here's your runway 26 departure procedures: a climb heading 259 to 1400 feet, then a climbing left turn heading 130, and the Pomona radial 164 to Prado intersection. And then a bunch of stuff along your assigned route. So 259, basically runway heading to 1400 feet. That's about 400 feet. And then a left turn heading 130 and is radial from the Pomona VOR to Prado intersection. So what I've typed in here is Brackett Airport, Pomona VOR, direct to Prado intersection. And then the clearance was Victor 16 to Paradise. And if we scroll down, I have an extra chart here. Let me get rid of that chart. And let me put the low altitude back up here for just a moment for this. So here's Prado intersection right here. And here's Victor 16 that takes you from Prado over to Paradise VOR. And then the Paradise 270 over here to Dowd intersection. Then Victor 394, which has a bend at Aheim, and it goes to Seal Beach direct. Okay, so we got Paradise, Dowd, Victor 394, Seal Beach, Fullerton. All right, you with me? So here's how we build it in the 530. And I hope I've downloaded this. In the 530, if we go to the flight plan, we go to the flight plan catalog. Oh, I was a bad boy and I didn't do it. I'm sorry. So we're going to have to build this by hand. Come here to the menu here. Not too bad though. We're going to delete everything. All right. We're going to give ourselves a cursor. We're going to start with Brackett Airport, POC, and then we're going to put the VOR in there. So the VOR is the Pomona VOR. That's Papa Oscar Mike. There we go. And it's a VOR in the southwestern USA. Yep, that sounds correct. Accept. And then we're going to put Prado intersection in there. And this is every bit as tedious in the airplane. It is a little bit faster when you've got a knob that you can twist rather than using the keyboard, but it works. Prado intersection, yep, that's good. And that's about the right distance, and course is looking good. And so now we put Paradise in here. You got your 2 tickets, right? So we got Paradise, PDZ, and then we're going to go to Dowd, which is, as an aside, a few years ago, these fixes didn't have names. It was just an airway, a radial, and you had to make a user-defined waypoint to make your GPS do it. I ran into a guy at a class I was teaching a few years ago, and he says, "Hey, did you look at the chart? They put these fixes in there now." Oops. Oh, DOWDD. Yeah, the old database doesn't have that. So you'd have to create that user waypoint right there. But the guy's name was Randy Dowd, and he got these 2 fixes named after him. So we're going to make a user-defined waypoint in there. We don't need to do that now, but I wanted just to show you that this is how you put it in there. We got the airport to the VOR. We're going to fly that radial to Prado and then to Paradise and then the other stuff. So let's see what this looks like on the map here. If we zoom in a little more, that on page 1, that's as far as we can zoom. So here's page 2. We've got the airport. We've got direct to VOR. We're not going to actually fly direct to the VOR, but then we've got the VOR right here. And then we've got this radial that comes off it. Zoom back out. Down here to Prado intersection and then over to Paradise and so forth. So the trick here is now go to the flight plan, give yourself a cursor, scroll down here to the Prado intersection, and we're going to activate this leg. Activate leg. We want to fly from Pomona to Prado. Yeah, that sounds good. Now we've got this pink line. Let's zoom back in a little bit so we can see it. The pink line extends from the VOR down to that intersection. And we're going to fly the runway heading here, 259, I think it said. And it's going to take it a moment to do this turn as we get going. So we're going to fly this heading out to the west here a little bit. And excuse this. Of course, you'd be facing the proper direction when you took off. You wouldn't be doing it this. You wouldn't be going to this direction because there's a big mountain right there. That VOR sits almost 1,000 feet above the airport on a ridge, just immediately south. So you would not be going this direction. But we're going to activate this leg and put it in nav, and we would intercept from the other direction. I forgot to hit the heading button. So that's how you fly that. This is one way of doing an ODP. And I saw a question posted online about another East Coast airport in the Smoky Mountains that has kind of a similar sort of thing. You take off from the airport, you turn around, you fly a heading to intercept a radial to another VOR, was into the VOR in that case, and then outbound and along your way. So the same kind of thing. You just think a little bit, draw a picture if you need to, of what this procedure is going to look like, and then you can put it into the box and hopefully the box can help you fly it. So that's the extra credit section there. Yeah, I see discussion on tech routes. You don't have to file them. That's true, more or less. I'm getting ready to do a class on tech routes, so stand by for that. And that's all I see for open questions. I've not been able to keep up with the chat box. So if you have something in the chat.
There was one thing in the chat that someone mentioned you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse to scroll through the letters on the knobs. Is that true in the simulator? You tried that?
Well, let's see here. Let's come down here to the flight plan. And I don't see it happening yet. My scroll wheel is not working for that.
Okay, I was curious about that.
I do.
The only outstanding question we have is if the approach is loaded, and will the 430 automatically start the approach, or do you have to select and activate the approach? A question we've answered before, but worth repeating.
Yes, I've covered that in the last program, part 5 on instrument approach procedures, but the short answer is no. You don't need to activate the approach. Once the final approach fix becomes the active waypoint and your aircraft heading is within 45 degrees of the course that the flight plan knows, it will activate. And you can tell that by, if you see here where it says term in the lower left corner of the display on the 530, that's the navigation mode it's using right now. It's in terminal mode. When the approach activates, it'll go into approach mode, which is a reverse video. It's going to be black letters in a green box. That whole box will be colored in green, and it will enunciate there what kind of approach navigation you have. If it's LNAV or LPV or LP plus V or whatever, that'll be highlighted here. Once it says that, you're in approach mode, you're getting the correct mode of accuracy in your navigation. And here's the danger. I want you to check this. Every time you go by the final approach fix, you need to, on an RNAV approach at least, you need to look in this box and you need to verify that you do not see term. If you're on an approach, you should not see term. If you do, you're getting the incorrect navigation and you could be outside the protected airspace on the approach and you could hit something. Yes, the Aviation Safety Advisory Group. Thanks. That's exactly what that group is. Great group, very highly involved with all the safety issues going on in Arizona. And I've really enjoyed being a part of that last few months. Richard is asking, how do you set the navigator to the geographic area you want to work in? You click on the options menu and you click on initialize position, and you can set any position you want in here. You can do it as a latitude, longitude. You can do it as a name of a waypoint or an airport or whatever. Put it in there and it'll instantly reposition the airport or the navigator to that point. All right, so with that then, gosh, we're done with everything and we're an hour and a half into what I was hoping was going to be a 1 hour presentation. So once again, I've gone overboard, as I always do.
It's all good stuff though.
Okay, so let me go back to, let me move these things out of the way. I don't care about those. So we talked about all these things. Vertical navigation, again, I really didn't talk a whole lot about that. The GNS is not very good with vertical navigation. You're kind of on your own. So you can set it up. Probably in a future one, I'll talk more about the VNav feature. I don't think I've mentioned that in any of the previous programs. So there's some fodder for a future episode. So questions and comments. Here's an email address that you can send any GPS-oriented questions to me. And I generally respond. Sometimes it takes me a few days if I'm busy working or whatever. So just be patient. I'll get back to you eventually. If you want wings credit and you're watching it live tonight, don't do anything. Don't send me an email. Don't call me on the phone. Don't send Guido. I will take care of it. If you're here tonight live, we got you covered. If you are watching a recording on YouTube or some other forum, watching it later, you can send an email to this address. And if you include in the subject line this WP number, 0510-9187, include that in the subject line. Just send me an email, and that's all it needs to say. And I usually get these done within about a week or so. So give me a little bit of patience on that. Here's the link again to Brian's webpage that has information, all the previous episodes, and links to some of the tools, some documents that are useful that we found over the years are available on that website. You can also look at my YouTube channel, and that's the shortcut to get there. Again, there will be a link to that in the follow-up email that you'll get tomorrow. Or you can just go to YouTube and search for my name and I'll show up in there. And if you like what you're seeing, if you found it valuable and useful, if it helped you along in some way and you're starting to feel generous, you can send us some dosh our way. I can take it 3 ways here. If you'd like to send an old style check, give me an email, let me know that, and I'll send you my address you can send it to. And that is all I've got for tonight. So I would thank you very much for coming tonight, and look forward to hearing your comments, and we'll see you on another program next year sometime. Anything else you got, Brian?
That's all I got. Thanks a lot, Mike. As usual, that was great. Appreciate it. We've got a lot of good questions for our next Q&A, and I think we'll save them up that we've got from tonight's Q&A, and we'll try to do a good workshop, including a lot of those questions that we didn't get to.
That sounds great. Yeah, and the interesting, the particularly interesting questions we will consolidate together, and I'll put together another program sometime next year whenever Brian and I can get to it. I know we've been a couple months late here. Brian and I both have been kind of swamped the last couple months. So we'll get one as soon as we can, and we will look forward to seeing you then.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Night, everybody. Happy New Year, and see you next year.